Empires have risen and collapsed like waves against stone. Ideas once whispered in secret have reshaped continents. This is the story of Europe, told through the echoes of 1,000 years. Across the vast tapestry of time, few continents have witnessed transformation as dramatic, violent, and awe-inspiring as Europe. Its story is not a single tale, but 1,000 worlds woven into one, a chronicle of tribes becoming kingdoms, kingdoms becoming empires, and empires becoming memories. To understand Europe is to understand the rise and fall of power, the birth of ideas, and the relentless drive of humanity to redefine itself. And to witness this journey is to see history not as dates on a page, but as the living heartbeat of civilization. Our journey begins in the shadows of antiquity, where scattered tribes roamed forests and mountains, unaware that they were laying the earliest threads of a continent's identity. From these humble beginnings grew mighty civilizations, each leaving behind languages, myths, laws, and wars that still echo today. As centuries passed, stone fortresses pierced the sky, monarchs carved borders with blood and ambition, and faith intertwined itself with power, reshaping hearts and nations alike. But Europe's story is not only a tale of conquest, it is also a tale of rebirth. When the ancient world crumbled, Europe did not fade. It reimagined itself. Out of darkness emerged a renaissance, a revolution of art, science, and philosophy that rekindled humanity's brightest flame. In its wake came new questions, new dreams, and new conflicts that would test the resolve of nations. As the world expanded, European empires stretched beyond their shores, reaching continents far across the seas. Their ambitions redrew the map of the world, ignited global conflicts, and changed the course of human destiny. Yet even as they grew outward, Europe faced storms within, revolutions that toppled ideologies that split societies, and wars so devastating they nearly erased centuries of progress. And through the ashes of these struggles, a new Europe began to rise, one that sought unity after division, cooperation after conflict. A continent once fractured by battle now tries to stand together, carrying the weight of its past while shaping the promise of its future. This is not merely a timeline. It is a journey through ambition, destruction, invention, and rebirth, a story written in stone, blood, art, and hope. This is the timeline of European history. In the earliest whispers of Europe's past, long before borders were drawn and kings claimed thrones, the continent was a mosaic of wandering tribes, ancient rituals, and untamed landscapes. Forests stretched endlessly, mountains carved the horizon, and rivers flowed like timeless guides for those who dared follow them. In this vast and raw world, civilizations did not yet know themselves. They were still learning to rise. Yet even in these primitive beginnings, the sparks of destiny flickered. Tribes gathered around fires, sharing stories of spirits, survival, and the mysteries of the earth. These early groups fought the cold, endured famine, and braved beasts that no longer walked the world. They were bound not by written laws, but by instinct and the will to endure. And in this struggle, the first foundations of Europe were silently laid. Each tribe carried their own traditions, languages, and beliefs, fragments that would one day become the cultural pillars of mighty nations. As villages grew into settlements, and settlements into fortified towns, the continent began to evolve. Stone tools gave way to bronze. Bronze surrendered to iron. With every advancement came new power, and with power came conflict. These early clashes were not fought for glory, but for survival. Land to farm, forests to hunt, rivers to control. Yet in these struggles, leadership emerged. Visionaries began to rise from the ranks of warriors, hunters, and elders, guiding their people through the chaos of a world reinventing itself. Civilizations soon began to take shape along fertile valleys and coastal shores. The Mediterranean sparkled with early trade, carrying not only goods, but ideas, mathematics, stories, rituals, and the first laws that would guide society. Europe was awakening. Tribes once isolated by mountains now touched through trade routes, alliances, and the earliest whispers of diplomacy. With every exchange, cultures collided, blended, and evolved. Across the continent, ancient European societies carved symbols into stone, raised monoliths toward the sky, and built the first primitive structures meant to defy time. Their achievements were humble compared to what would follow, yet monumental for an age still learning the meaning of civilization. These people did not know the empires that would rise after them, nor could they imagine the kings, philosophers, and conquerors who would one day walk the same land. But they left behind the soil in which those futures would grow. Civilizations in collision defined this era, not through written chronicles, but through the pulse of life itself. Every battle, every migration, every ritual performed beneath the open sky shaped the identity of a continent still finding its voice. Europe was a canvas painted not in a single stroke, but layer by layer, culture by culture, each contributing to the vast and complex story that would unfold over thousands of years. And in these beginnings, the continent discovered its first truth, that history is not born in silence, but in struggle, shaped by the hands of those who endured the earliest dawn of Europe. From those first dawns of culture, the continent entered an age where rising communities no longer fought merely for survival, but for dominance. The small settlements that once clung to riverbanks and hillsides began to grow into organized societies, each guided by leaders whose ambitions stretched far beyond the boundaries of their ancestors. And as these societies expanded, the inevitable clash between them shaped the next great chapter in Europe. A story and age defined by the rise and fall of kingdoms. The early tribes, once content to hunt and trade, began to understand the power of territory. The control of fertile land meant stability. The command of rivers meant wealth. The mastery of strategic hills meant security. This understanding transformed simple groups into structured clans, clans into chiefdoms, and chiefdoms into the seeds of kingdoms. Their leaders, no longer mere elders, became rulers whose authority extended over growing populations. With order came hierarchy. With hierarchy came ambition. In this evolving landscape, alliances were forged, not only through bloodlines, but through necessity. Marriages united rival clans, treaties secured fragile peace, and trade agreements brought prosperity. Yet beneath every handshake and promise lay the quiet undertone of rivalry. For every kingdom that rose, another felt threatened. And in this tension, Europe discovered the rhythm that would define much of its future. The ceaseless competition for power. The first fortified cities emerged as symbols of authority and fear. Massive wooden palisades and early stone walls encircled thriving centers of craft, worship, and governance. These cities became magnets for people seeking protection and opportunity. They also became targets. As one kingdom grew stronger, its neighbors grew anxious. Armies formed from farmers and hunters, marched beneath crude banners, wielding iron swords that turned disputes into destiny. Battles were fought not only for land, but for pride, influence, and the very right to exist. With each victory, kings expanded their domains. With each defeat, kingdoms crumbled into dust. Some vanished so completely that only a few scattered artifacts remained to whisper their names. But every collapse left lessons for those who survived. Power, they learned, was fragile. Wealth invited envy, and borders carved through conquest could disappear overnight. Across the continent, unique cultures shaped their own identities while watching each other with wary eyes. The Suits crafted intricate art and formidable hill. The Germanic tribes forged fierce warrior traditions. The ancient Greeks built philosophies, governments, and ideals that would echo through millennia. Each civilization believed itself secure, yet each existed within the shifting tides of alliances and invasions. And then came the great empire's vast forces that reshaped Europe with unmatched ambition. The republics and kingdoms that once seemed mighty found themselves overshadowed by powers whose reach extended beyond imagination. Roads, laws, languages, and architecture spread across the continent, unifying regions that had long been divided. Under these empires, Europe experienced both stability and oppression, advancement and upheaval. The rise of these colossal forces marked a turning point. No longer were kingdoms isolated experiments in power. They had become pieces of a grander, continental puzzle. But even these mighty empires were not immune to time. Civil wars, economic strain, invasions from the frontiers all chipped away at their foundations. What had taken centuries to build sometimes collapsed in a single generation. Yet with every fall came new beginnings. Former subjects seized the chance to shape their own destinies. carving fresh kingdoms from the ruins of the old. Europe became a living cycle of decline and renewal, where every end gave birth to a new contender. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe for the next chapter of this epic story. Rulers sought legitimacy through religion, inheritance, and conquest. Castles pierced the landscape, cathedrals soared toward the heavens, and dynasties rose, determined to etch their names into time. But the Game of Thrones was unforgiving. A single battle, a single rebellion, or a single plague could shift the balance of power overnight. Every victory added a line. Every loss erased one. Kingdoms expanded only to fracture. Dynasties flourished only to fade. Leaders built legacies, knowing they could be shattered by the ambitions of the next generation. But by countless forces competing, colliding, and rebuilding, over and over again. And in this relentless shifting of kingdoms, Europe discovered its second great truth. Power is never permanent. It is a torch passed through time, lighting the way for some, burning the hands of others, and forever reshaping the destiny of a continent. Merchants, scholars, and travelers brought new languages, technologies, and philosophies. Curiosity replaced fear. Debate replaced dogma. Slowly, a spark was lit that would ignite one of the greatest periods of renewal in human history. Architects raised structures that challenged the sky, their designs reflecting not just faith, but the newfound confidence of a continent rediscovering itself. What emerged was a revolution of the Minda Renaissance that elevated Europe from its medieval shadows into a period of brilliance. But ideas did not spread without resistance. The same continent that birthed innovation also wrestled with tradition, authority, and the rigid bonds of hierarchy. Great thinkers challenged old beliefs, and their words stirred debates carried across cities and kingdoms. Universities arose as sanctuaries of knowledge, where students from distant lands gathered to study, argue, and redefine the world they lived in. Knowledge became power, and, for the first time in centuries, it was a power accessible to those without armor or crown. As minds awakened, so too did ambitions. Europe looked outward, driven by curiosity, greed, faith, and the desire for discovery. Trade routes grew, empires stretched across seas, and Europe's influence began to carve itself onto distant continents. Yet this outward expansion brought consequences. The pursuit of power across oceans fueled conflict, exploitation, and competition between kingdoms, now armed with both ideas and ambition. The struggle for dominance grew fiercer, and alliances formed as quickly as they crumbled. These ideas, once discussed in salons and universities, soon ignited political upheaval that swept through the continent with the force of a storm. The rise and spread of revolutionary thought reshaped societies. Thrones that had seemed eternal shook beneath the cries for justice and change. Kingdoms that had stood for centuries found themselves at the edge of collapse. Wars erupted. Empires faced rebellion, and old orders crumbled, giving way to new visions of governance and identity. But even amid this turmoil, the spirit of rebirth endured. Scientific breakthroughs overturned ancient beliefs about the universe. Discoveries in physics, biology, and chemistry redefined the relationship between humanity and nature. Inventors engineered machines that transformed labor, travel, and communication. Europe was no longer simply reacting to change, it was driving it. Cities swelled with workers drawn by opportunity. Factories filled landscapes once ruled by nobles, and the rhythm of life shifted from seasons to machinery. The Industrial Revolution, born from centuries of curiosity and innovation, propelled Europe into a new era where the power of steam and steel rivaled the power of kings. Ideas flowed like rivers, shaping empires and dismantling them. From the ashes of ancient kingdoms and the brilliance of reborn ideas, emerged a continent forever changed. Europe discovered that its greatest power did not lie solely in its armies or rulers, but in its capacity to think, create, challenge, and dream. Across the sweep of centuries, Europe's story reveals a truth etched into every battlefield, every manuscript, every monument, and every revolution. The continent's greatest force has always been its ability to transform. But shaped what came next. The rise and fall of kingdoms forged resilience. The explosion of ideas awakened the human spirit. The revolutions of mind and power reshaped the meaning of freedom. And through every upheaval, Europe carried forward the lessons of its past, weaving them into a complex identity built on conflict, creativity, ambition, and rebirth. Its timeline is not a straight path, but a vast tapestry each thread, a story of struggle, brilliance, and change. The continent that once fought for survival now stands as a testament to the endurance of culture, the strength of ideas, and the unrelenting force of history. Europe's journey reminds us that civilizations are not defined by a single moment, but by the courage to evolve, the willingness to question, and the determination to rise, again and again, from the echoes of yesterday. Thank you for watching.